And so let's welcome Jennifer Kelchner. Hello. Who needs a nap after that meal? Right? That was delicious, but I haven't had a meal like that since my mama cooked for me at Christmas, and so I think I'll try to wrap it up short so we can all get a little rest. I talk with my hands, so I'm trying to figure out how I want to do this, so bear with me. I'll try not to make anybody seasick when I move around. That's what my dad says I do. I am so honored to be able to speak to you today. You know, it's folks like you that inspire me to do what I do. And people that lead and that serve and that value relationships, because that's exactly how I feel about life. And so I was very honored when they asked me to come and speak to you today. I admit I have notes to keep me on track because I like to talk a lot. I'll explain why in a minute. But mostly because I decided to rewrite everything I wanted to say last night about 10 o'clock at night. I'd like to think of that as genius, but more than likely it was just procrastination. But this is what I want to share with you today is about service, that it weaves the fabric of our communities, and it's all threaded by our stories. So that's what we're going to talk about today is community, your service as volunteers, and how your stories really are what create the culture of your community. So like I said, I love to be around people who serve and who value the relationships of the people around them. So I threw this little slide in for fun. This is just for effect, by the way. There's nothing really special, but I think you're all superheroes. So I wanted to make sure you knew that. I also happen to be a huge science fiction nerd, which is why I had to comment that you were superheroes, not just heroes. So, but it's pretty important to me that you knew that's how I felt. So what I want to do, your theme is that you volunteers are priceless, and I want to elaborate on that a little bit today. And what I really want to talk about is your value. What makes you so priceless that you bring that nobody else in the room brings, but yet you all bring at the same time? It's kind of like a riddle. So what I want to do is not talk at you, but I want to be able to inspire you to begin a discussion when you leave here today. And the discussion is going to be about your stories and how important they are to the people that you're in this room with. So the first thing I want to do is talk and explain about community. What really is community? The definition is group sharing a common characteristics or interests. So I think that you guys well define that as community. I had no idea before I came here today everything that you do, and then hearing the laundry list of activities and volunteers that make it run, you definitely understand the definition of community. But what's so unique about it are that our stories and our actions through our service become that thread that weaves the community. So it's our common interests that we discover through our stories. I really just included pictures so you didn't fall asleep because I can get really long-winded. Just teasing. So what I found interesting was when I went to look at the definition of what a volunteer is, it's the obvious, somebody that offers to do something of service for another person and not get paid for it. I think we all generally understand the concept. But what I found extremely interesting were the synonyms for the word volunteer. So I'm going to start my lovely little slide there. And they're all actions: to advance, to speak up, stand up, step forward, to bring forward, to take the bull by the horns. Nobody says that anymore, by the way. I kind of missed that one. To take the plunge, to take initiative. And what I find so interesting about it is those are all characteristics of leaders. They're all actions. They're things that you do in order to volunteer. So it's not just a noun or to define a person, but it's really what you do every day in terms of being a leader. By the way, I like leaders. I come from a leader's family. I'm a firstborn, so it should be obvious that that's my kind of people I like to hang out with. So what that means is you'll see me again. I will be back. But you know, our service requires action, and the action really is the service in and of itself that is what weaves this fabric of our community. And as I said, the stories are our thread. So let's talk for a minute about telling our stories. I have a really good friend of mine that said this to me yesterday, which is what got me to toss everything I had out the window. The culture of community grows through our stories. And he has a theory he's developed. He calls them story strands, that everybody has a story, and every time we interact with another person, we kind of leave a fingerprint of our story on theirs, and there they leave a fingerprint on us because we have an interaction. Each of those interactions leads us, those experiences, lead us to how we will shape the next moments that we walk into. And I love the idea of how quickly we can impact each other by just telling our story. These stories do more than just shape us, they help us connect. They in turn serve. So our stories end up serving a purpose, not to define us. I think it's really important. Our stories don't define us, but rather they enhance who we are and what we have to offer other people. Our stories can bring things like joy and laughter, remembrance, sometimes sorrow and painful memories, but ultimately connection, awareness, and hopefully healing. Just by telling your story can bring you to a place of healing, but it also serves to heal other people. So I want to tell you a little bit about my story. And I've got a really long story, so I don't have time to tell you today. But the reason I said I get long-winded is because I come from a family of preachers. Every last branch in my family tree has either a preacher, an evangelist, or a missionary on it, including most of my cousins. And it goes back 5 generations. So, we like to talk a lot. You can imagine what family dinners are like. My own children have not escaped this, I don't know if you want to call it a blessing or a curse, but it just seems to be in our DNA. But what I learned, and talk about it, I joke about it, please don't hold it against me being a preacher's kid. I pretty much was the stereotypical preacher's kid. But I learned so much by what my parents showed me and my grandparents showed me about serving other people, that you have to put your love into action to build community, that it is about serving other people, and how we walk that out every day. Now, as a child, I didn't understand that. I just knew I had to be there every time the doors were open, which I didn't like. It was not fun going 4 and 5 times a week and being that kid. But what a beautiful thing to now be able to look back and understand the community that I was a part of. We moved a lot. I've lived in 12 states and 18 cities. The vast majority of those were as a child. 3rd grade was rough. I went to 3 3rd grades. It was interesting. But what it taught me was that the culture of all the different regions I've ever lived in and the communities and how everybody is really the same. We look at different areas and we think, oh, they're so different. They talk funny. Anybody from up north? Just curious. Good, I got a few. Down here, you're looked at a little different. My friends still don't accept me as a Southerner, even though I was born in Mobile, Alabama, and raised primarily in the South, because I spent time above the Mason-Dixon line. It's just for high school. But we do that. We look at folks and we think, well, you just look different. You wouldn't get my story. There's no way you'd have a story like my story. But that's what moving around taught me. It taught me more than just accepting other people and how to kind of roll with change. And I'm one of those weird people. I actually like change. I move furniture around and everything just to experience change. But I learned that there's this value in being around people that have stories to tell, that are different than we are. My story, though, started to change when I was in my late teens and early adulthood. I had a little bit of wild hair in the sense that my independence showed itself more as rebellion for a period of time, or 20 years or so. I've always been the kid, and even as an adult, if somebody said go left, I'd say nope, gonna go right. But there's a cliff, doesn't matter, you said go left, I'll go right. And I started making some bad choices. I've been married twice, been divorced twice, lived through domestic violence, abusive marriage, things that most people don't expect when they start to talk to me. I have worked my way up into a Fortune 100 company. I've served in different management level positions. By the way, I did all of that without finishing my college degree. Just applied myself and hard work. So our stories are really valuable. And the reason I tell you that is to say, I know what I'm talking about, because it's where it's really going to get interesting. During the second marriage and working my corporate job, I ended up moving away from here, which is where my children are. It was one of those things that seemed like it made sense at the time, and then you get yourself going down a road that you can't figure out how to get back from. So 6 years later, I get back, and by the way, things are absolutely wonderful. 2 amazing kids. I'll tell you about them in a second. But my point of that is in that journey, in that process, I found that I was in so much pain, emotionally, physically. I was dealing with an illness as well that was very crippling. And I pretty much decided to give up. God and I were not good at terms any longer. In fact, I blamed him for everything. It had to be his fault. I mean, I'm supposed to be all powerful, right? It had to be. I just couldn't own my own choices. I surely didn't make all these decisions. And I was at a point that I decided I would much rather die than to live another day, because I just couldn't deal with the pain. Not that I wanted to do anything irrational. It was just that emotion, that there was just hopelessness, basically. There's just nothing else I could do. My oldest son came to me one day and he said, "Are you done yet?" I said, "I don't know what you're talking about. Are you done feeling guilty for yourself? Because we're kind of sick of it. We kind of like our mom back, you know, if you're done." And I thought, he was 14 at the time, and I thought, oh, geez, rude much? What do I do with that? But it was my wake-up moment to realize that I'm the only person making myself feel guilty about my story, about the choices I made, and it's about time I start rectifying everything. So, fast forward, 3 years ago, I really started a journey towards wellness and identifying and realizing how important my story was. By the way, on a side note, I have to say this because Susan and I found out we have this in common. We have children the same age, go to the same school. I have a 14-year-old amazing boy who's taller than I am, who's captain of his soccer team and also plays for the Strikers, and he'll be a freshman at Blackman this fall. And he's wonderful, but he's way too much like his mother, so trouble written all over that kid. The oldest, however, is not like me. And he's 6'4" and has a beard, and he will be graduating high school in a few weeks. And we're very, very proud of him. He's will be able to graduate with honors and distinction, and is going to UT Knoxville in the fall. And both amazing. So I say that to say, well, one, I like to brag when I can, but it doesn't matter how ugly you perceive your story to be, but there's always a blessing in it. Always a blessing in your story. So, when I started to share my story, I had to do it to overcome the fear of what I thought other people would think when they heard it. But I did it because I had to do it to heal myself, and I wanted to be able to help others. But by doing that, I learned a really important lesson that I want to share, that you have the ability to inspire other people and to create community, because that's how we find we have connections with people when we start sharing. Remember, your stories will never look the same as somebody else's story, but the emotions that you had that came from a story, those are the same. Everybody can understand love or loss or grief. So put your pride aside, because your story has a value which gives you a rich history. And when we share our stories, that's when the magic happens. We're able to relate with each other, grow our community, and that is when our history, our stories begin to serve each other. So here is what I have learned about service, our stories, and community. One drop creates a ripple effect. Change has to start with you. A lot of us think, because I've been guilty of it myself, well, if the other person would just change, my life would be a lot better. It sure would be easier if they would get on board with what I'm wanting to do. But the fact is, what other people think about you or what they do is none of your business. It's still a hard one for me to swallow, by the way. But it's true. What they think is none of their business. How you feel about yourself is. So when we create a change for ourselves, no matter what it is, an action or a belief that you have about yourself, that is what starts the ripple effect in the pond, and you will change the people in your family and your community around you by just working on yourself. The next thing is, sorry, that's kind of hard to see, it's an old microphone, that every moment of every day, you have a platform. So what do your moments say? If you think about that everybody's watching you, and if you think they're not, you're wrong. We're a culture that likes to people watch and poke and pick. So people are watching. So what do your moments say about you? Your words, your actions, your smiles or not smiling, everything says something to the next person. Even if you're a more introverted person, your actions still speak as your moments. Don't waste your platform. What's the old cliche about 15 minutes of fame? Every moment is your moment of fame that you have in front of another person, so use it wisely. See all this juggling, it's tricky. The next thing I learned is that love does. Everything must be done in love. It's not about work. So if your service, your volunteering feels like work, then it's not coming from the right place. You see, love and grace has its own energy, its own life force. So when you're doing things from the right place, doing it from a place of love and a place of willingness to serve others, that it kind of propels you, it gives you the energy, it does what you want it to do. This cover is actually from a book by the same name, Love Does, by an author, Bob Goff. And it's a wonderful book. If anybody loves to read, we need to try and get it in your library. I'm not ready to give it my copy yet, but I like to underline and flag and go back a few times. I'm a nerd, can I say? But you know, it's a wonderful book talking about what love does. The word does, it's an action. It requires being fully engaged in life. The love comes from in the doing, and that it picks up and goes places you may not necessarily want to go just because you can't help yourself. You want to help the people around you. So I learned that love just does. And this is my favorite. Our job is to just plant seeds. This quote is from a good friend of my dad's. His name's Pastor Otto in Philadelphia. I've never met him, but I've stolen his quote. I emailed him and told him I was taking it. But he says you can count the number of seeds in an apple, but you can't count the number of apples in a seed. So if you think about that, I had to chew on that one for a while before it sunk in. You know, if you plant a seed, there's no telling the amount of fruit that it will bear when it grows into a full tree and how many generations it can serve. It's about our actions, our stories that plant these seeds of love, of grace, of change, of hope. It's through the act of service of planting the seed that your value starts to take root. We plant a seed, we water seeds, but we don't worry about the fruit. And a lot of people say that, well, I'm doing all these great things and I just don't see a change in that person. What they do with it isn't your business. You're just called to plant the seed. There's a saying, and I don't recall who said it, you may never sit in the shade of the tree that you've planted. Just plant it. That's all that we're asked to do. And the last thing is, the big deal is that it's all about you. It's about you, meaning your value. Each one of you, and I'm going to try to contain my enthusiasm. I am a little passionate on this topic. And emotional. We don't value ourselves. We think that we're broken, that things that have happened in our history devalued us in some way, that we aren't worth the effort of somebody else putting and serving to us, or that we don't have the value and the worth to take to another person. And that's so wrong. We each were designed with unique combinations. Everything from your spirit to your heart to your gifts. And even your gift set that you have is uniquely different from the next person's unique combination. Now take all of your story and your experiences and add that in, and now your value has just grown. You bring such a richness to your community when you share your story, because your history is what makes you you. Remember, it doesn't define you, it just adds to your value. So all of the dark, ugly, dirty, wounded places, that's just life. And that's where it gets beautiful, because we all have a story of overcoming it. I encourage everybody to be your authentic self, because when I got transparent, what I found was people didn't run away from me, they flocked to me because they saw something that was real and something they could relate to. We had shared emotions, we shared overcoming trials, we shared the common thread in our spirits, that connecting through our moments somehow, through all of that, we were able to create a tightly woven, knitted fabric that now serves each other. There's no more fear, there's no more competition, and we've realized that we're all interdependent on the others. Now there's a little bit of a problem with serving. So as volunteers, I want to make sure you take care of yourselves, because burnout can happen. So don't forget to refresh and refuel when you need to, because if you don't fill your own love tank, you've got nothing to give the next person. And it's a really, really easy place to get to. We feel guilty if we step aside and we don't step up to the plate one day. So make sure you take the time to recharge. You are valuable and you are priceless. And don't spare giving that to anybody. And before I wrap up, I learned one more lesson. There's a wonderful book, and it was designed as a business book, called The Go-Giver by a gentleman by the name of Bob Berg. And in the book, he talks about the law of receptivity. It's the law of receiving. That it's a natural law of the universe. If something gives, it also has to receive. It's like the tide in the ocean is a good visual image. It has to pull from the shore, and it has to come back. It's forced to do it. I, along with my rebellion my entire life, have also had a lot of pride. Not in the way that one would normally identify with pride, but it was I wanted to be accepted. And if I put everything out there, then you might not like me, so that's where my pride was. If you knew everything, what would I do? Because of my pride, I would never ask for help, even if I needed it, and even if it was offered when I needed it the most, I would refuse it, because I didn't want you to think I was weak. I wanted you to see strength. I wanted you to see that everything was okay, I can handle it, I've got it together. The problem was, I was robbing people of blessings that they wanted to give me. You ever done something really good from somebody and you know that feeling you're left with? That just, you can't really name it. I mean, joy is even kind of too weak of a word to explain that feeling. You just feel lighter, your soul's happier. Well, I was taking that away from somebody because I refused to accept things. I couldn't even take a compliment. Terrible at taking compliments. But we'll work on that later. If you guys want to try, I'll just do a little line. You can compliment and work on it. But what I found is that it is natural law of the universe. If you give, you must receive. So be open to receiving, because when your tank is full, you have more to give somebody else. So in summary, remember, it's a ripple effect. It starts with you. Share your story, and it will change the others around you. You have a platform every day. Don't waste your moments. Love does. It's an action that can take you everywhere, and it will fuel you. Our job is to plant seeds, not worry about the fruit, and that it is all about you. You are exceptionally valuable to everybody around you. I have to get my little story for you here. I just saw this recently on Facebook, and it's so applicable. These little children all with their little feet in a circle, which I think is just a beautiful picture in and of itself, but they're coming together, their sense of community in that moment. The picture bears well for the story. There was an anthropologist who proposed a game to an African tribe, and he placed a basket of fruit at the base of the tree. The game was whoever got there first won the sweet fruits. So he said, go. The kids held hands and ran together. They got to the tree at the same time, and then they sat down together, eating the fruit. So he asked, well, why did you go together? One of you could have won the whole basket for yourselves. And he said, well, it's Ubuntu. How can one be happy if all of the others are sad? And then he said, Ubuntu, I am because we are. And I just think it's such a beautiful reminder that your community, through your stories, through your connecting, through your relationships, what you do here every day of the year, And I think it kind of speaks to that. You are because all of you are. And I just think it's a beautiful reminder in your service, and thanking you for that, what you give to each other in your relationships. Just hope that you go out and start creating discussions and sharing your story and see what you can learn from each other. I think you'll find that your value for yourself will start to increase and your value for others. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Let's give one more round of applause for Miss Jennifer. And we got her a little